Hey, Nick Adolphson here from the Maine Christian Civic League. I have the privilege this afternoon of being in Weston, Maine, actually right next door to Danforth at Living Waters Bible Camp, and have the chance this afternoon to chat with Elbridge Cleaves and with Tammi Matula about what happened in MSAD 14. I'm going to get the school wrong, Elbridge, East Grand Lake Schools, or East Grand Schools.
East Grand, yeah.
God's doing some amazing things and did some amazing things in the school district. And we're going to talk about that a little bit. And I'm going to have you guys introduce yourselves in just a second. But before we do that, I want to I kind of want to level set the conversation, because I think about this often. I'm a story guy. I love the Old Testament, right? I love all the stories and the history in there. And when the people of Israel finally get to go into the Promised Land, they're crossing the Jordan River, and God's given Joshua some commands, right? And he's headed to Jericho. And one of the things he tells them is, I want you to take 12 stones representing the 12 tribes. Mm-hmm. And I want you to pile them up. And I want you to tell your children and your children's children, when they ask, what is that pile of stones? I want you to tell them what God did. And God had done a work in his people to get them to that point, to free them from Egypt. God did a work in helping them cross the Jordan River and was about to do this work in Jericho as they took the land. And I think I don't always do that very well. We live in this fast-paced culture where we just, we step in and we move on, right? So we have a success, we have a win, we check it off, and we're off and running. We don't often tell the stories about what God did and how he worked. And so we're going to do that today. First, I want the two of you just to introduce yourselves, and then Tammi, we're going to get into who you are and where you came from and talk about this kind of, I hesitate to call it a fight, but I guess it was a fight, right, with MSAD 14 around Title IX and the change and the win that happened there. So, Elbridge, give us just a quick intro of who you are and where you come from.
All right. Thanks, Nick. Yeah, I'm a fourth generation here in the town of Weston and Danforth area. My forefathers paddled up the Penobscot and up the Bascahegan and settled on the side of the Bascahegan River. And so I can vote in town business. I'm enough of a resident. And my wife is from East Millinocket, so she's from away, all right? But this is called home now for us for years. And my background is in forestry and timberland management, very familiar with the state of Maine, and developed a love of the woods and a love of the state of Maine. And certainly a love of our area and want the very best for it. And that kind of summarizes to some extent why I came alongside this issue and Tammi as a Christian friend.
All right. Tammi, why don't you tell us who you are and what your role at the school was and all that, but tell us a little more, because I was saying earlier, I've seen pictures of you in different places and never actually seen a picture of you in a school. It was always like in a canoe or somewhere in the wilderness. And I assume there's a story there. So tell us a little about your background and where you came from and how you ended up in the school and all that. And then we'll jump into the story of MSAD 14.
I was born in Pennsylvania, but grew up in Maine, the little short stint in Quebec. But I say my love for the outdoors started with my dad. He's a biologist. And so it was very normal for me to explain my dad's occupation as he chases bears. And that was normal for us, to be able to go in on the dens with him. And he'd bring orphaned animals home every once in a while. And so we grew up kind of in that setting in LaGrange, just a small town. A lot like where I'm living right now, actually. But one of the things I always begged my parents is I want a canoe camp. I want a tent. And we actually never did that. And we'd go on vacation up in the Allagash. There was a game warden who was a pilot who would allow us to vacation there in exchange for work. So we'd often spend 2 weeks at a time. And he'd drop down and give us rides in his plane, and just became great friends with them. And so I think it's always been in me I love the outdoors. But once I reached school age, I also enjoyed sports a lot. So I was a gym rat. And so I pursued that straight ahead until college. A couple years into college, I went to Cedarville, studied education finally. But it was after I graduated, I was pretty burnt out with sports, and called Living Waters, which is where we are right now. And the director of the wilderness program was Dave Conley at the time. I had met him, but I was like, I'd love to try. Well, I'd like to learn outdoor stuff. I have no background, and I really meant that as far as paddling or some of these fundamentals. But I'll volunteer, and so I ended up involved for 11 years at Living Waters. And
So was that like all summer long, or was it a couple of weeks?
no, it was all summer long.
Okay.
Yep, and I had no intention of getting my guide's license or even my trip leaders initially. I just wanted to help. But one by one, my mentors ended up getting married, moving away, whatever, and all of a sudden it was me. I did get my trip leader's license, and I ended up getting my guide's license eventually as well. So after the 11 years here at Living Waters, I ended up guiding commercially for the last several years now.
So you guide commercially, and you still guide commercially.
Yes.
All around the state, just canoe stuff. Do you
Mostly
do
canoe.
hunting and fishing
no,
too, or
not
just
much
the
of
canoe?
a hunter.
Okay. Okay.
Maybe a bird or two, right?
Yeah, but in Canada too.
Yeah.
In Canada.
Okay. And up in New Brunswick.
Yeah, Canada as well.
And Quebec.
And Quebec. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome.
So that's what we do, predominantly canoeing.
So you're a guide. You're doing all of that kind of work. You took education in school. You ended up in a classroom. Classrooms are a whole lot different than a lake or a river.
Yes.
So how'd you end up in a classroom, and how long have you been doing that sort of thing?
I started out at Maine Christian for 2 years, which is where I graduated high school. And I think it was my second year in 4 white walls. And I was looking out at my 17 kids, mostly boys, and I was like, I'm pretty sure I'm more bored than they are. So I knew about halfway through the year that this probably wasn't the best fit for me, but I didn't know what was next. I went back to Living Waters that summer, and I just wasn't sure what was going to be next. And what was next was this opportunity to start working in a public school system. I worked for a couple different grants up at Southern Rustic, and the whole outdoor piece started to really open up for me at that point. And I was learning right along with the kids. I'd started with Living Waters, not too far into it, and I was learning with my kids in the after-school program at Southern Rustic, and I fell in love with it.
So tell me about the draw to working with kids, because there are certainly, I guess some people stumble into working with kids, but there's certainly a calling that comes with that, right? And if you do it for too long, then you definitely have a calling, because otherwise you're like, I'm all set with the shenanigans and whatever else is going on. So tell us a little about that.
I've had the privilege of working at East Grand School for 15 years in different capacities, and the most recent one is my PE. But they've given me all sorts of opportunity to be creative in the one area that I love, and it's getting kids outside and introducing them to all sorts of things. One of the things I've talked about the kids, especially last year, is like, how are we going to gain confidence? Well, we've got to do hard things. So it gives me an excuse to, like, if there's a hard task that they have to do something hard. That's how we gain confidence. And so literally, I think I've felt the squeeze for a while coming. COVID was a big shift. And I've had dear friends leave teaching. And others that have been discouraged if they have not left. And I think it was last year, actually, the last couple of years, God's like, you know what you do, because you're dealing with kids, is the most important thing that you do. I don't care how good you think you might be as a guide, or how maybe there's better jobs out there, or business opportunities, whatever it is. But the most important thing that I do is what I do with kids. And that's not because what I do, it's because of the value that he puts on kids. And that is something that I've come to in the last few years, in the sense of being more content. Like, teaching is hard. And anybody that disses teaching or teachers doesn't understand how hard it is. And I work with really dedicated teachers. It's important work. And that's why I don't want all the Christian public school teachers to exit public schools.
That's right.
Heidi said in your podcast, we can't just leave our public schools to go to hell, so to speak. We need these kids. They're our future. And they don't have a choice. I have a choice. I can walk away. Like, I don't like your policy, I can walk away. They don't have a choice. They're like a captive audience. So our public schools are really, really important. That is where my heart is at. And so I think it's been a shift in me over the last several years anyways. Like, what I do teaching-wise, it may not be easy. It may not be, I may not even feel a lot of days that I'm that great at it. But it is important because of who they are and the value that God puts on these kids.
You do all the stuff at Living Waters, you're at Southern Aroostook doing the outdoor program, and you end up teaching PE here at East Grand Schools for like a decade, a little more than a decade. I got a phone call from Elbridge, or an email maybe from Elbridge.
Yeah, to begin with. Saying,
hey, we don't really know where to go, but we got an issue going on up here. And Elbridge, can you just, you don't have to go all the way into the weeds, but just kind of tell me, like, what prompted that phone call for you before
Sure.
we get into Tammi's side
I
of the
think-
story?
I think probably more than anything else, even though I came reluctantly, it was clear that Tammi was making a decision in such a way that God was going to honor it. And so it felt compelled to do what needed to be done there. And I think one of the things that led me in your direction to seek assistance for us and for Tammi was that we had watched your podcast of Josh Allen and how you came alongside that situation and provided tremendous support for he and his family in a very tough situation, in a tough environment. And that had a big impact on me. And so, besides the fact that we know Benny Buber, which was one of the founders of the Christian Civic League, came from Danforth, was a circuit preacher here.
Yeah.
I said, I think we need to call these folks and see what they can have to help us.
Yeah. So back me up a little bit and tell me why were you even talking to Tammi? Tell me what transpired,
Okay.
and I'll let Tammi jump into the details from the
Okay.
school side. But
Okay.
you heard from her what was going on at the school? And
I remember Tammi coming to the house and sitting in the living room and saying, she had this copy of this policy, and she said, Elbridge, I feel I just can't go forward knowing that I'm going to be asked to enforce this policy that is going to be damaging to kids, keeping parents in the dark, and against everything that we believe in terms of our Christian values in regard to gender and so on. And so she was basically asking a question and looking for advice. And I said, Tammi, you're absolutely right. You can't do this. The opening sentence of that policy essentially said, the district will assist in the development of transgender and gender transitioning. So that set the tone not only for what was in print, but what could be adopted through other means, is that the entire district, that means the taxpayer, the teachers, everybody associated with that school system, is going to assist in the development of transgender and transgender affirming students. So that set the tone for everything else under it. And you really didn't need to know any more than an opening sentence to say, hey, wait a minute, this is crazy. And so that's what hit me, even though there were a lot of specifics in there that would be mind-boggling, destructive to family, teaching kids it's okay to lie to parents, you name it. But that one sentence at the top is kind of all I needed to know.
So I had a conversation with my wife this morning where I said to her, do you think we'll ever get to retire and life will just be easy and we won't have to make any hard decisions or have hard conversations? And so, Elbridge, you saw a need and you didn't sit back in the recliner and flip the news back on and say, sorry, good luck. You said, and this is part of this conversation that was so meaningful to me when we first talked back in August. It was that you saw this as part of your calling, and that there is you don't get to age out of God's call on your life to act and to, again, be a mentor, to entrust to a younger generation truth and good things, but also just to be active. So
it's interesting. I was in the recliner when I made that decision, and part of what happened is my sister called and she said, "Elbridge, you're a deacon of a church. You have Tammi as in a member of a Christian community. You can't say no." And I said, "Yeah." I said, "You're right."
Thank God for sisters, right? Yeah. So you got a call or you had a conversation with Tammi and you discover a friend, a sister in Christ is struggling because she discovered the policy at the school, and a policy she as a gym teacher is going to be forced to be the enforcer of, did not align with Title IX as we understood it. Instead, it was a policy that was going to force her to have to be part of allowing a biological male into the girls' locker room.
When I got reading through the policy and also had some help, like interpreting, like, is this really what I'm seeing? Because what I think I'm seeing is that kids are steering the ship. In other words, they can come to you and be like, this is what you're going to call me today, and this is where you need to send me today. And it didn't matter, according to that policy, if parents were on board with that. It didn't matter if parents were even informed on that. It didn't matter if other parents, that their children were being affected by, for example, a boy going into the girls' locker room. None of that. There was no guardrails. That's what I kept thinking. Like, there's no guardrails on this at all. Like, it felt like no checks and balances. And as teachers, we're there to teach kids and to guide them and to teach them not everything you want or feel is best for you. So I'm going to say no. And on some of these big issues, we couldn't say no. That's what the policy was telling us. Parents who are entrusted with the care of these children couldn't know. And so it literally boiled, it took me probably a night to process it. I woke up the next day and I'm like, you know what? If a kid goes to East Grand School as the policy is written, they are not basically guarded by parents, and they are not guarded by teachers. If a teacher signs up to teach at East Grand School, signs a contract, they are basically not allowed to protect kids, and they're silenced. And so that was more the realization that really kind of stuck out to me. It was the lack of parental control and the lack of teachers being able to speak or to set guardrails that are common sense.
Tammi, this is and I want you to get into the weeds a little, because it's fascinating to me, right? This Danforth, and one of the things that Elbridge said to me when we first talked was, he made this comment that the school is almost a Christian school. There's so many Christian teachers.
Yeah, there is a lot of influence.
So it raises this question, well, what about all the other teachers? Are you the only one? And it's just really interesting that the pieces were so small. This policy wasn't something that was advertised all that publicly. So talk a little about kind of how it came about that you were the one that ended up with this policy in your hands and ended up having to kind of make that decision.
We do have a great school, and I have a lot of good friends who teach and staff and that work at the school. But we started, I think, going down this road last year. So I think there was a number of us really starting to like, what do we do about this? Like how do we address this? Like, is this going to go away? And in my mind, I'm like, who's like, we're going to change this, but how are we going to change this? And who's going to, I mean, do we have to organize ourselves, or how does this work? And I think by nature, I don't want to be the one stepping forward. And we have great people working there. But the situation I was in was starting this year. I was struggling coming into workshops, knowing what to do. There had been parents that had visited the school board at a meeting or shown up to a school board meeting and said, we found out through our children that this is going on. Some things are going on at the school. They're upset about it. Grandparents were there as well. The next board meeting, I showed up with the grandparents, and just from a PE point of view, it was pointed out that that would be possibly a situation that I would have to face, is sending a child into an opposite gender's bathroom. How does that look? How do we protect, children? And what was communicated to us, day number one, was that even though some parents have problems with this policy, the board has chosen to wait that out, and as it gets sorted out in court. And if there's any problem with that, go see the board. And so it felt very clear at that point. I was praying, God, just give me wisdom. And that conversation or announcement just felt like, okay, that feels pretty clear. But I did show up the next day, and by afternoon, or once we broke from a large group to a small group, I told a friend of mine, I'm like, I could ask some questions. And it was really more for accountability, because I don't want to rock the boat either, you know. But it's the difference between really feeling like you have solid information, and this is what I think is, I'm gonna have to do, but I hadn't really heard it maybe black and white. And so I asked to be put on the agenda to discuss transgender policy or issue, if it were to come up, what would that look like? And I asked several questions that I got clear enough answers for, that I was like, wow, like this really is real. And this isn't just something that's gonna go away.
Yeah, and those were answers that were at least not clearly articulated really prior to those couple of days.
No.
You hadn't signed your contract yet. Most teachers had already signed their contract, right? That would be the norm. But you hadn't, and you're in this room and you ask this question. So it's clearer to you. What happens next?
Yeah, after I asked my questions, the principal sent me the policy in an email. And when I read through it, and not even in great detail, but enough detail, I was like, wow. So it was like more of a black and white. And it just felt like all the guardrails were off. Like in regard to, like, basically kids were going to be like steering the boat. and we were going to be responding. And I had already downloaded or read, the transgender pamphlet that's on your site. And it's like 30 some odd pages, I think, or more. And so I'd already kind of understood that this system is set up to like start planting doubt in kids' minds early on, and then socially start affirming those doubts if they start to verbalize those. And once that happens, a lot of them don't pull out of this mindset as easily because we're all affirming because we have to. In this case, we have to. And then it could lead to hormone replacement, and it could lead to surgery. And with regard to our policy, parents don't need to be involved at all. And so it became clear to me, like as I was processing, and maybe even the next day, I was like, do parents know that when they sign their children up for our school, that they don't have the right to know about their children if they're struggling with their gender, or we're making decisions for them or affirming things? And do teachers know that if they sign up for our school that we're basically silenced?
So that policy was emailed to you. Was it on the website? Was it?
No.
It hadn't been published and sent to
No.
parents, or published and sent to teachers even,
As was required in the document.
as was required. So it wasn't very transparent. There wasn't a big advertisement.
No.
You were the one ultimately that had this policy in your hand. Also uniquely one of the few that, or maybe the only, that hadn't signed a contract yet with the school,
Yes.
right? Yeah, so there's a interesting dynamic in the State House when legislators will run a parental rights bill. There's inevitably a parental rights bill from a good legislator who says, I want to enshrine this in the Constitution. I want to make sure parental rights. The response is always, you already have that constitutional right. What are you worried about? And then we learn that the policies generally in our schools look like this, right? Where parents don't even have a seat in the car, and in fact are left out, not only silenced, but like you don't get to speak to them at all. So you have this conversation, and this is where I feel honored to have gotten to be part of kind of just post some of those early conversations. And you began to consider something, and it was literally, I'm going to walk away from my paycheck. I'm going to walk away from 12 years of this job. So tell me what's going through your head that you're willing to take that kind of step. Like, why does this matter that much?
I just, if you don't have trust with parents or with kids, then you don't have anything. You don't lie to children, and you don't lie to parents, who I believe have the biggest right and have the biggest say in their children's lives. And I teach the children of many of my friends, and it was just this really weird eye-opening. It's just like, I am in a situation where I can't authentically communicate with either the children or the parents. And I believe that's a line. I figured maybe someday there'd be a line. I teach health, that perhaps there'd be a line someday that I couldn't cross. But I think it was that realization boiled down to those couple of principles. You don't lie to kids, and you don't lie to parents, who are the biggest protectors of their children. That's not our right. That's not the school's right, and it's not a teacher's right. And I, along with many of my friends who teach, are being put in a situation that we don't believe in. And I didn't believe at that point that many actually, or any, had ever seen this policy. That was the feeling I was getting with just the few conversations I was having, that this was not widely known. And it was dangerous.
So Elbridge, so we had a couple of really good conversations, and I very quickly knew we were in over my head, right? We were in a place where you needed some real help.
Right.
And so this is a shameless advertisement or plug for the Maine Education Initiative and Heidi Sampson, but we called Heidi and Sam Whiting,
Yeah.
and I assume probably Alan Sarvinas was involved at some level, but these guys had worked in Hodgdon. They've been working all over the state.
Right.
Very few people that I know that are more dedicated to helping transform
Right.
school boards, helping really shine a light on what maybe the legal counsel told a school board and what is actually possible. So we made that connection for you guys and Heidi. But before you get into that, I don't think we really hit on this, that the conversation you and I had early on wasn't just a conversation with Nick and Elbridge, or even Nick, Tammi, and Elbridge. It was, I don't know how many people were around your dining room table or on the conference call, but there were a number of people from around the community that engaged in this, right?
Yeah.
We were talking about this earlier, the
Right.
importance of this isn't a cowboy thing where you go out and you go it alone
No.
and you try to overrun or overrule.
Right.
This is pulling people of similar convictions. Many were believers. I think many were not maybe part of your church, but wanted to engage in this. So you don't need to name names necessarily, but how big was that group, and what did you do next? Say we engaged you with Heidi and Sam, and what did you do next? Tell us a little bit about that part.
Well, probably around the table that night, there was probably 7 of us, I would say. And so I think what I mentioned to you, Nick, was, and it's true, I think, in the Bible and true elsewhere, is that you really are benefited by having a team, having people that, more than one. It's not one that, so you find people that are committed, that are willing to make an investment, and you gather around as a team, and you have strength in that. And so that's how we approached you in that regard. And we were learning from Hodgdon, no question about that. And that
Success
what we needed
begets
to
success,
do,
doesn't it?
was to really think through the strategy and the resources that are out there and how we can best bring them to bear on the situation, so we can stick to the issue that's in hand, be respectful in our communication, and try to bring together in a kind of a contingent, or in a complementary fashion, community members and Christians. So it isn't just a Christian issue, it's a community issue.
Right.
We knew we had a school board that was going to be, because they loved Tammi and the community did, that was going to be open to hear good, solid advice and counsel.
Yeah.
And so it all came together.
Yeah. So some of those first conversations you had with Sam and Heidi and me, the discussion wasn't yet even, what are we doing at the school board? It was, what's Tammi going to do, right? And Tammi, you ultimately made a decision to write a letter of resignation, which I know you did with a lot of counsel from Elbridge, from the team. I know a lot of thought
And from Heidi's
and prayer,
background, for sure.
and from Heidi's team. This part, I think, so you send in that letter of resignation, and then the school board conversation kind of begins. And I want to talk just a little bit about everything that MEI did to come in alongside, because in part, I want other school boards, Christian school board members, I want other Christians or people in their community to understand this is a resource that can help turn school districts around.
Right.
So I want to talk about that a little. But before I go there, I just, in driving up here today, I was thinking about this. You resign, right? If you had lived your life in this community in a way that was offensive to everybody, if you had lived your life as a Christian who was, judgmental or hateful or bigoted or any of those things, your letter of resignation would not have mattered, and it would have had no power for the rest of the conversation, right? Because people would have said, great, she's gone, thank goodness. Instead, your letter of resignation moved this entire conversation. And to me, that's an important part of this, because I think often as Christians, often in the political context, we're looking for that moment where in this moment I'm going to make this big change. I'm going to have this impact. I'm going to do this or that. First of all, you weren't looking for that at all. But second, that the moment of impact of that letter of resignation only existed because of the 12 to 20 years of moments you had here at Living Waters and in the school district, building a reputation and being a woman of faith in your community and impacting the kids and the families. And I know you didn't come here for compliments, but for me, that's such an important part of this whole conversation. And as I go into battle in various places, and as other Christians and other conservatives go into battle, I think it's so important for us to remember it's not just the moment. It's the 12 years of moments, the 20 years of moments that are going to give that moment weight. So I'll stop. I'll get off my soapbox. Talk to me about MEI and kind of the next steps that you went through with the school board. And we don't have to get way into the details, but I want listeners to have a picture of kind of the resource that came alongside of you for this fight. I'll start with I know you'd been told something, the school board had been told stuff, given guidance by the law firm that represents the district. And so MEI can come in and say, like, they can critique that, right? And I think that's part of what they did. But let's talk about that a little bit.
Okay. I think in our case, it wasn't clear that the superintendent on down worked for the school board. They have authority to make decisions. And so that was but putting those resources together and the people together, knowing that you can have, a group of school board members around the table, it's basically got to be one-on-one with those experts, required a fair amount of effort. Yeah. But one thing comes to mind. I'm a big-time A-type, and I wrestled with that all my life. I like control. And so when we got to the point where we had provided a lot of notice out and have spoken to a lot of different pastors and churches, and that you need to show up here at this meeting to support our school board. We just want you there to support, as numbers to support in a very respectful way. It came down to going the extra mile and trying to ensure that we have 150 people there and they're all going to mind their business. And I got on Heidi, got with a conversation with Heidi and another member of the team, and I said, how are we going to make sure this happens? And Heidi said, Elbridge, you got to back off. I said, give God some space to operate. Yeah. And that was like 2 days before the vote, and I said, just breathe. Oh man, that is exactly right. Yeah. Hang up the phone and let God work.
Well, and for me, that's one of the greatest lessons out of all this is I think too often we wait to act because we're not the expert. Mm-hmm. There's somebody else, and this word expert's a big, you're the lawyer, you're the doctor, you're the expert. Yeah. And so we back off and we forget a couple of things. One, you might not be the expert, but we can find the person who is. But two, we serve a big God, right? And he's ready. And you've entered this battle, you've entered this conversation because you felt called to. He's not going to walk away.
Right. One of the things that we're benefited here is that we have a group of pastors that even though they have they may pastor different churches of different Christian religions, they get along well. They understand that, look, let's not be down here disagreeing on the minor issues. Let's agree on the things we can agree with. And so having that, if you will, consortium of Christians by different churches that can come together in a situation like this and unite. You haven't got to put that together. It's already there. And that, I think, is a really important thing. And I will say that, probably there's nothing better than 30 years in the ministry to get that through your head, that it isn't worth arguing about. Yeah. All right.
Well, and what you're saying is not churches need to compromise on
No.
convictions. It's saying, hey, on these big things, we got to be shoulder to shoulder
That's right.
together in this fight.
That's right.
And that's
And so our pastors recognize that. So we may not worship together, but we have a common goal in terms of saving people here.
And I want to say this. I think it was a Thursday that I decided I can't teach. I don't know how to do this, but I'm not going to be able to teach this year. And it is the next morning I show up, and there was already this team forming that I had no idea about. And you were on the phone, and you had already started forming a team. There was a team of people that I knew in the community. That's a miracle. And so that, I want to say with the Civic League meeting, this organization that I've heard about but never tapped into was there. And so I'm here, and I know I've got to make a big decision, but what I did not know is the team that he had already been preparing, not just in our community, but in Augusta, and had been, my dad has supported you. I mean, it's just like, it's been on my radar, but that's a big deal. And so we begin to recognize that we're a body here, and there's strength in that. And God says, you take this step of obedience, but what we don't know is through prayers and expertise, different people that he's going to support. Elbridge was one locally that I knew, I trusted his advice, and once he stepped into that role, he never just dropped it. And I could move forward and then just take a break, or move forward or disconnect if I needed to, but his connection with you guys, and then connecting with Heidi, and I'm still not sure I understand the whole story. I'm getting it to, piecing it together. But it was just like all of a sudden God was going to carry me through this. And so that's, to me, like honestly, the biggest miracle of my life. And I would like to speak to the board meeting, because I remember sitting in my house and watching cars start going by, and it's like, wow, there's a lot of people here. But then showing up, and you could sense right away that there was a peace, and they had to move it from the cafeteria into the gym. And you see people walking in, a lot of young people. And I believe I'm still going to put these pieces together, but I think it was teachers talking to other teachers. I think it was parents talking to other parents. I think Elbridge talking with the pastors, and them talking to their congregation members. But the message was clear. We're not looking to destroy people, or we're not looking to smear people. We are looking to stand with our board on a very important policy, or a very important subject matter, And so the environment was very clear that it was peaceful but strong. We had a lot of men showing up, a lot of dads. And we had parents speaking, we had grandparents speaking, we had Alan speaking, we had someone from Hodgson speaking and sharing. We took the stand, and we still, nobody's taken our funding away from us. We took the stand, our children are still competing. And so Hodgson, I have to say, they gave me courage. I heard about it in the spring. I'm like, oh, wow. And so it gives courage. And so I want to be able to explain like what a big deal that was, to even plant the thought like there is another route, or another school has really taken a bold stand on this, and they were our neighbors. And right before our board meeting, Baileyville took the same stand. And so there's courage in that. And our board, with help from Heidi and the work with Elbridge and you folks, and I'll let him speak to all that. But what I saw was a very confident board, They were organized. They knew how to run the meeting. They were professional, but it took tremendous courage on their parts to do what they felt was right or reflected the community's desire. And it was something probably, you talk about these pillars or these, these stone, it's one. And because of what God did. And it was very obvious that God brought people together because the environment's different.
Yeah.
And we saw results, and it was a miracle. And I would say that for the next couple of days, I kept like, oh, God, you did a miracle. And he's the only one that gets credit for this whole thing because of how quickly it came together from the time I decided I need to resign, talked to Elbridge. Next morning, there was this army with me, I felt. And it was like God had literally tapped, you're the one. You need to step up. I don't want to, and I still like this hesitancy, but you know what? He was there when I just had to say yes. Or I almost left the religious piece out because I figured it would, who knows, I didn't know how it was going to be received, but I didn't want that to be the piece where you're religious, and this is why you can't handle this. I think many people have this view. It's because it's an easy. I kept saying this is an easy one. This has to do with kids, and it has to do with harming kids. Like this is a really easy issue. Right. Actually, there's some that are a little more confusing. This was easy. But what wasn't easy was maybe how you handle it and how it was going to be received in the public. But it was advised that I keep that religious piece in. And as time went on, I began to realize, like, you take that out, and that's the underpinning of the whole thing. God created gender. He thought of this. Male and female, But you take those pins out, and everything is up for grabs in the sense of we don't have a leg to stand on. But when you put that back in, and so it is because of if you want to call it religious beliefs, but it's because what God has done and what biology reflects. That is why we can't. That's not a role we want to play with, and if we do, it creates chaos, and we see that around us.
Yeah, well, and that's the importance, I think, for the church to be teaching and helping people understand the underpinnings of a conversation. That this whole conversation in one context is just political, right? It's the school board, it's this fight about policy and that, but we know that it's not. The underpinnings of this is my understanding of the Word of God and of who God is and of what God created and His creation of life, right? And that He created us male and female. And so, to your point, we can have a political perspective, and a lot of people who don't necessarily read the Bible like I do share my political perspective, but the underpinnings for the church and for Christians matters so much. We don't know how to deal with a situation like this in the right way unless we have those underpinnings. And that's if we get to challenge the church in all of this, we get to challenge parents in this whole conversation. To me, that's the challenge, is as a parent, am I teaching my kids political talking points because I want them to be conservative, or am I teaching them the underpinnings of who God is? And I don't think this because somebody told me to politically. I think this because I read Genesis and I read the rest of the Word of God, and it's what He created. And that's a powerful testimony to be able to say that piece, as you went on, became more and more important. Yeah.
It's a school that I do love. I love the community. Community's been fantastic, and there's a reason why I brought my parents up here, because I love this community, and they've given a lot to me, a lot of opportunities. And when he took the policy seriously and then ended up getting you guys involved, and you were reflecting the seriousness of this policy, one of the most radical in the state. And we get legal counsel on it. This is not safe for kids. It is a violation of parents. And then it just kind of took on a different level, like this, I don't have a choice. I don't know how this is going to turn out, but I literally don't have a choice. And to see Elbridge take it and keep going with it and giving up fishing opportunities and who knew and who does know what else. And to see, we watched the interview with Josh, but also with Heidi, the one you did, and it was just like she is in the battle, but she's happy about it. And we got laughing and pausing and talking about things that, you know what, we can take a different attitude. This is kind of simple, actually. This is a simple issue as far as to discern. This feels like common sense. And the truth is on our side. I kept thinking, like, I wouldn't want to be the one having to defend this policy in the sense of, like, to explain why this is best for kids. That's why we do what we do as teachers. And so it was just God showed me this a step at a time, and the resignation was tough. And then what next? And but our community teachers pulled together, community parents, which were the huge ones, like parents. We heard over and over in that board meeting, step up, parents, step up. And because it is their God-given authority over these children, in the sense you are telling us as a school what you want. And we did. We heard from moms and dads and grandparents at this board meeting. And to just over and over, God, you carried this. You put this together. You provided Elbridge and other people in the community. You provided your organization and Heidi's organization and Alan's organization and all these things. And a friend of mine quickly told me, this is not about you in the sense of, why am I here telling a story? It's because it's about what God is doing. We see it on a national level. And I can't fail but to mention Charlie Kirk's death was in between my resignation and this board meeting, and I know it had impacted me, but I'm sure it impacted our community as well, as far as what he stood for, what he was bold about, the price he was willing to pay. And we're kind of on the coattails of many people, Donald Trump and his organization, and the heavy lifting they're doing, and what we heard at that funeral. They're not ashamed of Jesus to say that. And that should give us boldness. Like, this is why we're doing it. We've got someone bigger to answer to someday. He's the one that created this whole idea. And so we're just a piece in this whole thing. We have the opportunity to say yes or no. And I'm saying yes, but it's with a whole lot of support, and it's with him ultimately that gets the glory on this. And so I'm actually pretty excited to see how God is going to use this. I want him to use it. Early on, he said, gave me a passage, I think it's been confirmed. He said, Jehoshaphat had these people coming against him. He said, God, we don't know what to do. There's a multitude. We don't know what to do. And he said, stand and see the salvation of the Lord on your behalf. And he got people together and they worshiped, and God created ambushes, and they ended up fighting each other, and it was God that got the victory while they were standing, not hurrying, hustle, bustle, and trying to campaign in the sense what he was calling me to do or continues to. Like, are there a lot of pieces? Yeah, there are, but it's him that has to work. Because none of us are perfect. None of us have perfect judgment or perfect knowledge, but he does. And he's willing. He's not willing that any perish. And so that's probably one of my biggest messages is that whether you're a teacher, you're an administrator, you're a board member, or a parent, there's always a way back in the sense of none of us do this perfectly. We shrink when we should step up, or we step up when we should just stand and let him do it. But he's not willing any should perish in the sense of, or that we've gone too far in the sense. But if we collectively say, okay, this is about the kids right now. This is common sense. It really is. This is about protecting the vulnerable. And if we collectively say that, and we're willing, no matter where we are on the spectrum, to like bring people along and not smear them, so to speak, or hold them down, be like, yeah, like we saw that too. Like, come on, help us out. Imagine what kind of impact we can have. Hopefully not just in Maine, but nationally and worldwide, because this is a battle. But Bible says, and I think this was given, maybe you were the one who said it, darkness only takes over if light retreats. And so that's our choice. We can't, nobody does that for us. We have to shine that light. And he used someone who's doesn't want to do that, but I've had people around me to encourage, and I've seen really good examples, and he taps you on the shoulder and be like, you're it. And but you answer that call, and you have no idea. We don't see the battles he's fighting for us and what he's going to provide for us as far as resources. And ultimately, we get heaven someday. So that's pretty good.
Battle's already been won.
Yeah, it's already been won, and we're just a piece in this.
Yeah,
and
that's.
He gets the glory.
People recognize that our little school here is very important to our community. Mm-hmm. And things that put it to risk, which this policy, I 100% believe, had it been fully rolled out and done, would have disenfranchised a lot of our people.
When we compromise little things because of the potential economic impact, when we begin to do that, the little things become big things, right? And our communities find ourselves where we are because we've been, and I say we, but myself included, we've been willing to kind of let little things go. And this is not a knock on Maine Girl Dads at all, because I think they're an incredible organization. But when they came out, Maine Girl Dads, there's I don't know how many people they have that have signed on now, but just a movement around boys and girls sports. My wife says, a little late, don't you think? And I said, what do you mean? She goes, I think the dad should have showed up a long time ago. Yeah. And it wasn't a judgment on, Maine Girl Dads. It was a judgment just more broadly on us as a culture that, we let the little things go here and there, and all of a sudden that pressure becomes too much. And like, well, now I'm going to have to give up on a big thing because we're going to lose our school if I don't give up on this. And the other thing is, I have no idea how many teachers, good teachers across the state that we've lost, who have retired early maybe. I was thinking about it anyway, but we've lost them because they knew they were going to be put in this position that you were, and they were going to have to make a decision between their convictions and their kids. They were going to have to make a decision. Am I going to live my convictions right now and make a spectacle out of a kid? What am I going to do? And they said, you know what? I'm going to opt out. And we lose good people. We lose the good influences. We lose. You said earlier, Tammi, something about the kids really being in control, right? With these policies. We want good schools where the teachers are in control. The teachers are mentoring and teaching our children and raising them up, discipling them in what is good and what is right and the academic things that they're going to need for their future. And as these experienced folks leave, and I have no idea, and I don't think anyone has a count on how many have opted out. And so for me, that's part of the reason it's so important that we tell stories, but also it's so important that we stand up and we show the illustration of a school district that said, no, we're going to stand up. So one thing we never did in this conversation was actually say out loud what happened at the school board meeting. So what happened at the school board meeting, correct me if I'm wrong, but the school board voted unanimously to roll back any existing policy around the transgender. They voted unanimously to put in a policy that aligns with something that I think has been written already, but aligns with Title IX as interpreted by the Trump administration. And they also voted, I believe, unanimously to reject Tammi's resignation. Now that doesn't change things instantly, but as a voice and as a forum, the school board stood up on all of those things unanimously and said, yeah, no, that's not where we're going. Yeah. Our convictions are here, right, and we go no further. And again, I wasn't in the room, but what I heard was first of all, the evening was polite.
Right.
It was not a raucous riot,
right,
except that there were 3 standing ovations each time those unanimous votes happened. And so we got to celebrate that. We got to celebrate a win. I think we also, in celebrating, I know there's things still going on behind the scenes in the school and in all of our schools that the other side's not going to back down because you got a good little win at the school board. They didn't get this far to walk away. And so East Grand schools and the teachers there have the continued responsibility to continue to stand up with their convictions, to continue to do the right thing, and to continue to watch for what's not in line with what the school board wanted. And we got to celebrate our wins, but we can't celebrate and walk away, right? The battle doesn't end there.
No, we stayed involved. Yes, people need to understand when this happens, you can celebrate this as a battle won, but it's not the war.
Right, right. No, and you referenced spiritual battle, and I think we can close with this. Otherwise, I'm going to keep you guys here all evening. We were talking earlier. The first spiritual battle you see articulated in Scripture was a question that cast doubt. Yeah. Right. It was the serpent saying to Eve, "Did God really say?"
Right.
And I think we often look for the big battles and they're like, where's the big battle that I'm supposed to be part of? And I mean, the very first one, did God, it was a subtle question. And so as believers, for those who listen to this who are not believers, conservatives, we have a fight in front of us. It's not always going to be obvious. It's not always going to be big decisions. Sometimes it's going to be as subtle as that question is, did God really say, this is probably going to be okay, right? I don't think this is going to be a big deal. You're not really going to die. You're not really going to, lose your funding. And so, Elbridge and Tammi, I've told more people your story in the last couple of weeks because it's been such an encouragement to me. And I keep quoting this passage of Scripture from 2 Timothy chapter 2, where the Apostle Paul is giving Timothy some instruction, and he doesn't end his instruction, but he, after telling him to be strengthened in grace and to be mentored and to mentor, he tells him to share in the suffering with his brothers as soldiers. And I think of that often these days, that if we're not shoulder to shoulder, sharing in the what was some suffering, right, as soldiers, we're not doing what God calls us to do. And I so appreciate your conviction, your courage, your strength, and your willingness to go into battle with one another and do this. And I'm so excited about the outcome. And we'll be watching Danforth and Weston and East Grand schools for the final outcome. And we're going to be watching all over the state because other schools are going to continue to follow. So thank you both so much. I really appreciate your time and your conversation.
Yeah, thank you, Nick, and your organization, and then Heidi's. Yeah, thank you.
You got it.
Thank you.